Imagine earning up to $150,000 a year and paying zero federal income tax. Sound unbelievable? Well, that's exactly what President Trump is proposing. In a bold move to reshape America's tax landscape, Trump aims to eliminate federal income taxes for millions of Americans, contingent upon balancing the federal budget. But what does this mean for you? What does it mean for the economy and the nation's fiscal health? Today, we'll dive into this groundbreaking proposal, exploring its potential impacts and challenges that it faces. All right, so let's get into this. So first off, where did this come from? This is new. This is not a campaign talk. Like, Trump has been talking about no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. Those are things that have been talked about in full discussion. But this topic of no tax on those making $150,000 or less hasn't come up before. So this is new. And where this came from was on Tuesday, March 11th, the U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in a CBS interview shared Trump's tax objective. And he said, quote, "I know what Trump's goal is no tax for anyone who makes less than $150,000 a year. That's his goal. And that's what I'm working for." And this is what Lutnick said. Now, to be clear, this is a goal. It's not reality yet, but this is a goal. And I think that this is important to think about because, I truly believe that this was a slip. This is not something that has been said by Trump publicly before this. So I think that this was probably something to slip, but I think it really is kind of peeling back the cloak a little bit and looking into President Trump's intention. So there's a lot of things, and we're going to talk about that need to happen in order for this to be a possibility, but it's clear that the administration is thinking about this as a future end goal. It's not something that they're putting in the tax bill that they're working on right now. So I just want to be very clear. Don't stop your withholdings if you're making under $150,000. This is not something that is in the current tax bill, but this is kind of peeling back the cloak and kind of looking into the future and saying, what are some of the intentions of the administration? What are they looking to do? So that's where it came from. Again, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was on a CBS interview that said this is Trump's goal. Again, not something that's been publicly said before this, but this is the goal and this is kind of where they're going to. So I want to talk about how could this even happen? And the first thing that Lutnick said in this interview was that it was made very clear that a balanced budget would need to occur first. So this isn't even a possibility unless we have a balanced budget. And as we know, Congress sometimes has struggled creating a balanced budget. So that is a hard task in and of itself. So that's kind of the first thing, is that a precursor to this even being a potential is a balanced budget. But to me, that's motivation too, because that is us thinking, the administration saying that that's their goal, is to have a balanced budget. And if we can get to that point, it's going to start opening the doors for some of these other opportunities. But that's just the first goal. That doesn't mean that this is going to be clear. And so Lutnick also in that interview talked about, how are we going to pay for this? How is this going to be even possible? Because this affects millions and millions of Americans. And so he talked about a potential source of revenue to help pay for this would be attacking overseas tax frauds, because he feels that there is a lot of fraud going on in these various different overseas tax schemes that is causing the U.S. to lose a lot of revenue from these different structures, different things that are being put up that are not, either in law or they're loopholes that we might try to close. So that is one opportunity that he talked about. He also talked about the $5 million U.S. visa program as a potential way to cover that. And that's kind of been touted as a potential where they call it the gold card instead of the green card. So that's another possibility on how this could happen. Another way to cover it would be tariffs. And we know that, Trump has talked a lot about tariffs and this possibility of outsiders funding our government, and that would be in the form of tariffs. Some people say tariffs are paid for by the consumer. Whatever way we look at it, that would be a potential way that tariff revenue could help cover some of these items. And as well as, obviously government spending cuts. Everyone's talking about DOGE, and there's a lot of items about what DOGE is doing, the cuts they're doing, and all these different frauds and different things that they're finding or saying to be found. And so that's another potential. And these are kind of all just opportunities that could help pay for something like this. And, maybe it's all of them, maybe it's some of them, maybe it's a little bit of all of them. So, again, how could this happen? First things first, a balanced budget has to occur. That is one thing that they mentioned would be a no-go if that didn't happen. So balanced budget And then how do we start to pay for this? Maybe we're looking at attacking tax frauds and bringing some increased revenue because they feel like there's a lot of revenue being missed just because of some of those setups. Maybe it's the gold card, the $5 million US Visa program that they're talking about putting together. Maybe it's tariffs, maybe it's government spending, or maybe it's kind of a perfect combination of all those that might lead to something like this. Now, real quick, if you're looking for more tax strategies and expert guidance, I built a company called TaxHelm, where we don't just give you ideas, we actually help you implement those tax strategies. Our system turns tax saving strategies into real dollars saved with clear step-by-step guidance and implementation. So if you're serious about paying the least amount of taxes legally possible this year, click the link in the description below and book a free discovery call with our team. Let's make this the year that you see real tax savings. All right, so back to this concept. Now let's talk about economic impacts. What economic impacts could happen if this were to occur? So if we could balance a budget, if we could have cuts or increased revenue in some way that would make this a possibility, what would that lead to if we implement this no tax if you're making under $150,000? Well, an obvious one would be it would increase consumer spending, because a lot of times that kind of income bracket, that kind of income area are going to, if they're paying less in taxes, more money in their pocket, they're going to go out and spend it. So it could increase consumer spending, which would be a great thing. It would likely increase savings rates. You know, a lot of people probably in this bracket, in this income range, are doing a lot of spending and not doing a lot of savings. So that saved tax money could be potentially put to good use in savings. In between the two of those, it would increase overall economic growth. So I think from an economic standpoint, there's a lot of good things that could come from this. But first, we gotta say, is it even possible? Because I don't think those economic impacts alone would be nearly enough to cover the loss in revenue that we would have from a shift like this. So what is the public saying about this? You know, what is kind of the public opinion when this concept gets brought up? And this is something we always want to think about. So a politician says something, how does the public take it? And then how do other politicians take it? And I want to say one thing, you know, in Congress, I think it would be hard to vote against this, because this group of income earners is the vast majority of voters in the US. So if this were to get proposed and it was viable, I think it'd be very hard to vote against. Now, where it would be easy to vote against is if debt continues to rise, spending's not where we need it to be, the tariffs aren't working, and all these other things don't happen. It'd be very easy to say, we just cannot do this. And I don't think that they would even propose it if we were in that situation. But we would have to think that Congress would vote for this. This would be hard to turn around. This would be hard to vote against, especially for a politician who depends on people in their location to vote for them. It'd be hard to vote for this when the vast majority of their voters would fall under this category. But the key thing here is that we would need to see movement on the debt reduction. We need to see movement on the increased revenue or decrease in costs to make this viable. So I think that first things first, let's make sure that it is even viable. Let's do those things to make sure it's viable. And if that's the case, if that comes to fruition, I think then you could see Congress and other people getting behind this very quickly. So I want to talk about my take. You know, what is my feeling on this concept, this idea? One, I think it's very vague. So $150,000, no tax under that, that's great. Does that mean that everybody from 0 to 150 pays no tax? Does that mean if you pay $151,000, if you earn $151,000, now it's all taxed or just $1,000 taxed? Again, when politicians come up with concepts, with ideas, and we talk about this a lot, there's a lot of details that come to be say, okay, here's what they say, but here's reality. And so it's vague. It's vague right now. We don't know what reality might mean with this very simple concept of no tax under 150K. We don't know what that means in actual practice, in actual real life instances. So maybe it's a tax bracket change. Maybe the 0% tax bracket goes from 0 to 150, and that's a possibility. But we would need to kind of start to go down that route, and once it becomes more of a reality, I think we'll actually start to learn more about that. And I want to take this time to also say that, you know, there is a lot of things going on in government right now. There's a lot of news coming out about different tax strategies and this strategy and this tax law change and this tax law change. But I want to be very clear that the tax law, the way it's written right now, as a business owner, we should be thinking about how can we lower our tax bracket with what we're dealt with today. We don't need to depend on Congress or the government to change tax law to save on taxes, because the government has already given these things to us. This is already in the tax code. It's our job to learn about these strategies and then implement them. And that's exactly what we do at Tax Helm. So I want to be very clear. If you're kind of in a boat that saying, man, I am just paying too much in taxes, and so I hope that they pass this, or I hope that they do this to lower my taxes, I want to say change that mindset and say, okay, I'm not going to depend on the government to put something new in place that's going to lower my taxes. I'm going to take what they've already given us, what's in law today, and I'm going to make sure I'm using that. And hey, whatever comes down the road, maybe that helps out, maybe it makes it worse, I don't know. But I'm going to use today what's available to me, and I'm going to see tax savings today by implementing that. Because I see business owners day in and day out come over to me, whether they're a listener of our podcast, watcher of our YouTube channel, member of Tax Helm, that say, I'm paying too much in taxes, and they're not utilizing the strategies that are already available to them. So that's the first starting point. So kind of back to this concept. What's my take on it? I think it's definitely not a 2025 item that's going to be discussed or put in place in 2025, and likely not even a 2026 item. There's going to be a lot of changes that need to occur in order to make this a reality. Again, we talked about increased revenue, increased spending reduction. How does that calculation of economic growth play into this? So there's a lot of things that need to happen in order to make this a reality. So I think it's a good thought. It's an uncovering of the cloak, but I think it was probably too early. It probably wasn't supposed to be talked about yet because it's too early. There's a lot of things that need to happen in order to make this a reality. What's a reality today? Some of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and extending those items. That's what we're talking about today. Those are real possibilities here in 2025. This, no taxes for those earning under $150,000, I personally don't think is a true 2025 item, and likely not a 2026 item, because there's so many things that need to happen in order to make that a reality. But I will say this, it gives me hope. It gives me hope as an American, as a tax professional, that they see it as a potential. They're talking about it. They're saying that this is their goal. So that means that they think there's potential. And what does that mean for us as citizens of the US? That means that they're talking about, they think that there is ways that we can lower the debt, we can increase revenue, we can reduce spending, and there's ways that this can actually become a reality. So it gives me hope that they're working to achieve this. Because if we could achieve this, that means that there's so many good things going on in America. If everything lines up, that this is a potential possibility to put into place, that means a lot of other things are going well as well. Again, I want to talk about, when we talk about tax savings, I want to say, let's utilize what's available to us. And that's exactly what we do every single day with business owners across the country, is we talk about the tax strategies that are available, that the government has in place, but they don't put on billboards, they don't email you, they don't implement these strategies for you. It's your responsibility to understand what's in the tax code and then implement it. So instead of trying to follow all these news things, say, oh, well, this is going to happen, and I'm going to hope on that, and if it doesn't go through, now I have no opportunity to save on taxes. That's not true. There's stuff in the tax code available to you today that you can take advantage of to make sure this is the year that you pay the least amount in taxes as legally possible. So let's do a quick rewrap of kind of what we talked about. Again, this was a conversation in a CBS interview that came up with U.S. Commerce Secretary, where they mentioned that Trump's goal is that there's going to be no tax for anyone who makes less than $150,000 a year. Again, this is a goal. How do we make it happen? The first thing that they made it very clear, there needs to be a balanced budget in order for it to be a possibility. They talked about attacking overseas tax frauds that could help bring in revenue to help cover this. He also talked about the $5 million US Visa or Gold Card program as a way to do this, tariffs as a way to do this, government spending and DOGE spending cuts as a way to do this are all possibilities that could help pay for this. But first things first, we got to have a balanced budget. And I do think that if this were to occur, we would see increased consumer spending, especially in that group that's no longer paying any taxes. Think about the money that they could spend by completely reducing that tax bill. And so increased consumer spending, increased saving rates, which I think overall would increase overall economic growth. How much and what kind of revenue would that bring in? We don't know. And there's, obviously economists that will kind of talk about that. I think from a public opinion, it'd be very hard that if we hit those benchmarks of what we need to save, reduce debt, cut spending, increase revenue, if we could meet those benchmarks, I think it'd be very hard for Congress to vote against. But it's a very high hill to climb to get to that point where we're at that place where we do feel safe. So my personal opinion, One, I think this is not a 2025 or even a 2026 item, but it gives me hope. It gives me hope that they're working towards this, and that means a lot of good things are going to happen. Increased revenue, decreased spending, and hopefully all that's being done while also reducing taxes. Again, a lot of things need to happen in order to make this a potential. And I also think it's very vague. You know, $150,000 or less is great. What happens if you hit 151? What does that look like? Is this a tax bracket change? So there's a lot of details around a policy like this that would need to come to light. And those are the things that I have questions on. But again, I want to be very clear. When we talk about tax savings, we don't need to wait for Congress or government to implement something like this. There are saving opportunities for everybody, business owner or not. There's saving opportunities available to you, and that's exactly what we talk about on Tax Helm on a daily basis. So, as we've explored, President Trump's tax proposal to eliminate federal income taxes for those earning under $150,000 is both ambitious and I would think a little controversial. And while it promises increased disposable income for many, the challenges of balancing the federal budget and potential shifts in economic dynamics cannot be overlooked. So now I want to hear from you. Do you believe that this tax plan is a step in the right direction, or do you foresee unforeseen consequences from this? Drop your thoughts in the comment below. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on this. And if you want to dig deeper on this whole tax savings idea, book a free call with our team at Tax Helm, where we don't just plan tax strategies, we help you implement them. There's a link in the description for that. Finally, if you found this analysis helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more in-depth discussions on tax strategies to ensure that you pay the least amount in taxes legally possible. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.